Hey everybody, Mac here for OCR Kings, and today we're talking about building a Spartan Z-wall.
Basically, our Z-wall consists of 4 8x4 foot 3/4 inch thick sheets of plywood for the walls, 3 8-foot 4x4 fence posts for the uprights to attach the walls to, 3 10-foot 4x4 fence posts for the footers, 4 8-foot 2x4s, 2 for the handholds, 1 as a wall support, 1 for an A-frame, and 1 12-foot 2x4 for the top support. We hold the whole thing together with hex bolts since we like to take down and transport our obstacles, but more on that later. You'll also notice that our Z-wall is actually an L. This saves on building material, but since we go fully around both sides, it actually results in 4 sides rather than just the 3 you do in a Spartan race. Hardware. In addition to the wood, our build uses 12 5-inch 3/8 diameter hex bolts for the walls, 4 7-inch hex bolts, 3 8-inch hex bolts, 2 6-inch hex bolts for the A-frame support, 42 3/8 by 1/2 inch fender washers, 2 3-inch long 3/8 diameter hanger bolts, 6 9-inch strap ties, 1 box of 330 2-inch multi-purpose screws, and 24 number 8 1/2 inch wood screws. We'll talk about all these things as we go, and they'll also be listed in the description below. Now please note that using power tools and lifting big heavy pieces of wooden structures can be dangerous, so don't fuck around. Take every safety precaution and use/build/view at your own risk. Construction. Hand and foot holds. First, grab 2 8-foot 2x4s and start measuring 6-inch sections. Draw some nice guidelines. Take a circular saw and start cutting off your future hand and foot holds. Do this so that you have 32 6-inch pieces. Next, get your pile of handholds and footholds and start drilling 5 1/8 inch pilot holes all the way through each. The pilot holes will ensure that the holds don't crack or split as we screw them to the walls. Put 1 hole in each corner and 1 in the middle like this. Footers and uprights. Take a 10-foot 4x4 and place it on the ground. Measure out 5 foot from one end. Mark as your center mark. Measure 1 3/4 inch up from the edge of your 10-footer at your center mark here to find dead center. Next, measure 1 3/4 inches to the right and to the left of your dead center mark and draw a line down each. This will help as a guide when you place the upright on top and drill through both in a minute. Take an 8-foot 4x4 and place parallel to the footer. This will keep things level as we then place an 8-foot 4x4 on top of our footer. Make sure that the 8-footer is in between the lines we just drew and that it is square on both sides and flush with the bottom edge of the 10-footer. Adjust as needed. Also make sure that the 8-footer is level. Adjust there as needed too. Once your edges are good, measure 1 3/4 up from the bottom edge of the 8-footer and 1 3/4 inch in from either outer edge and mark dead center. Take a 1/2 inch diameter boring bit and drill through both the 8 and the 10-footer. You may need to go through the 10-footer again separately to make sure you went all the way through. Repeat this process 2 more times for your other 8-foot and 10-foot 4x4s. Wall 1. Grab 2 8x4 pieces of plywood and a body, because this takes way longer if you do it by yourself. Take 2 8-foot 4x4s and place them on the ground with the holes we drilled earlier facing out. Place your plywood on top of the 4x4 posts. Line up the plywood so that the edges are even with the edges of your posts. You may want to tack down a corner if things keep moving around on you. Keep going all around and make sure that all of your edges line up. Check your edges to make sure they're flush. Once they are, start tacking them down with a pilot hole and a screw in each corner. These screws will come out later, but for now they'll stop the plywood from shifting. Measure 6 inches up from the bottom corner of your plywood sheet, then 1 3/4 inches in from the edge. Mark as dead center. On the other end, measure 6 inches down from the top edge of the plywood and 1 3/4 inches in. Do this for both sides and both sheets of plywood. Grab your drill and 1/2-inch boring bit and drill through both the plywood and the 4x4 below it. Go around the horn and do this 8 times in total. It's a good idea to label all of your pieces so you can remember what goes where. This one is BL for bottom left. Mark your posts too so everything lines up. On the other end, we have bottom right. I did top left and top right too. You can take the temp screws out at this point, but keep the pieces nearby. On the inner edge of your BR 4x4, you should label it left in for left inner, and right in on the other post. When you're on the reverse side of the wall, you'll see why. One last step for this side of the wall, wall 1. Over on the bottom right side, we need to leave some space for the footer, which you can see here. This will become even more evident when we assemble the whole thing and when we stand it up at the end. Take the piece of plywood with the label BR. Measure 4 inches up from the bottom and 8 inches in from the outer edge. Make a nice 4x8 inch rectangle and cut this piece off. Relabel as necessary. Wall 2. Take the 8-foot post labeled BR and lay it on level ground with the BR and single footer hole facing up. Place one of your remaining 2x4s on top of it. This is going to become a stabilization piece for the second wall. It will help when we go to stand the thing up, preventing the 2 pieces of plywood from flopping around. Square off the edges of the 2x4 and the 4x4 upright. Once the top sides are flush, tack it down with a couple of screws. Get the other 2 unlabeled, undrilled pieces of plywood and place them on top. Get the remaining 4x4 upright, meaning the one not labeled BL from before, and slide it under the plywood pieces. Go around to each side and each edge and make sure they're flush. Tack down a corner and keep going around to make sure your plywood is flush with the edges of the 4x4 uprights. Once everything is square, tack down all corners of the plywood to the posts. This is sort of like before, but this time we're going to measure up from the bottom edge 8 inches and 1 3/4 inches in. And 8 inches down from the top edge of the plywood and 1 3/4 inches in. Mark dead center 8 times, then get your drill with 1/2-inch boring bit and drill straight through the plywood and the posts below. The holes are set at 8 inches here so that wall 2's holes won't intersect with wall 1's holes on this post. Label this side whatever you want, but here I put in left with an arrow for which end is up, and at the top another arrow and in left. On the other side is in R for right and an arrow, etc. At this point, take out your temp screws and move your pieces off to the side. Assembly. For wall 1, take your 8-foot 4x4 and lay it outside a 10-foot 4x4, lining up the holes drilled earlier in the center of the 10-footer and the bottom of the 8-footer. The BR label should be facing you. Take your 8-footer labeled BL, place it inside a 10-footer, and line up the hole at its bottom center to the hole in the middle of the 10-footer. Take an 8-inch hex bolt, slide a washer on it, then slide it through the hole in the footer, then through the hole in the upright. Place a washer on the other end, then a nut, and hand tighten. Go to the other side and repeat. Make sure you do this so the BL is set on the ground to the left, with the BL 8-footer upright on the inside. The BR is set on the ground to your right, with the upright on the outside. Now, stand up the BR 8-footer. Take a 5-inch hex bolt and washer and slide it in from the back. Do this 3 more times for the other holes in the upright, and lay the upright back down on the ground. Do this for the other upright labeled BL. Take your plywood piece labeled BR and place it on top of the BR upright with the bolts going through the holes. Place a washer and nut on top of the bolts and hand tighten. Go to the other side and do the same thing for the piece labeled BL. Take the top piece of plywood for wall 1 and lay it down on top of the uprights with the bolts going through the holes. Attach with washers and nuts, hand tightening only. Now, this is a step that we actually did last, after we transported the wall far out into the woods and it was assembled in upright, but we figured we'd mention it here. For stability of the wall pieces, we used 9-inch strap ties, 2 on the front and 1 on the back of each wall. We placed the ones on the front 2 feet in from either edge, and then the one in the back dead center at 4 foot. We attached each with 4 number 8 half-inch screws. For wall 2, we took our other plywood pieces and laid them face down, or label side down, on the ground. We went to the edge labeled in R and started putting 5-inch hex bolts and washers through the front of the wall, so they stuck up like so. We then took the right in 4x4 and placed it on top of the plywood with the bolts going through the holes we drilled, and then attached with a washer and nut. Next, we attached the 10-footer to the outside of the 8-footer with an 8-inch hex bolt, 2 washers, and a nut. On the other side, we placed our 2x4 support piece on top of the plywood, lining up the holes we drilled in each. We then slipped 7-inch hex bolts with washers through each hole. At this point, tack down the 2x4 to the plywood pieces with 6 2-inch screws. Holds attachment. Hand and foothold placement on our Z-wall took some doing, but the positions are based off an actual Z-wall and relative measurements, meaning using Damer's and my proportions to figure out the distances from top to bottom and in between. Using screen caps, which I'll provide links to in the description, we were able to figure out that the first handhold is a palms, or roughly a 4-inch distance away from the lead edge of the wall, and about a forearm's distance, or 12 inches, from the top edge. But before measuring and attaching the holds, grab 8 pieces per wall that you're working on and put 5 screws partially into each pilot hole. Now you can follow our specs or create your own, that's totally up to you. But what we found though is that typically the handholds alternate, slanting up or down at 45-degree-ish angles. One faces, say, 2 o'clock, then the next faces 4 o'clock, and are separated at no less than 18 inches but no more than 24 inches apart. They are also never higher than 3 to 4 inches from the top edge and no lower than about 12 inches away from the top edge. The footholds are placed much the same way, alternating in up and down angles, typically not lower than 9 inches from the bottom edge and not higher than about 14 inches. Again, they're spaced between 18 and 24 inches from each other. If your handholds start at 4 inches from the lead edge of the wall, then your last foothold will be about 4 inches away from the tail end of the wall. You can work backwards placing them if you wish. This is how we worked it out, but again, where you place them is totally up to you. We recommend mixing it up a bit. Top hangers. Next, take 2 3-inch long, 3/8 inch diameter hanger bolts and grab a drill with a 1/4 inch size bit. The hangers look like big screws on one side with a smaller threaded side on the other. These are going to go on top of the 2 upright posts, the ones that are diagonally across from each other on the outside non-connected edges of the wall. Take the upright labeled TL and drill a 1.5 inch deep hole right in the center of the top of the post. Place the hanger in the hole and hand tighten. Take a wrench and tighten it down so that just a little more than 2 inches is sticking out. Make sure that the threads will stick out more than a 2x4's amount. You may need to adjust the hanger's depth. Get the upright labeled right in and repeat the process on the top center of that post. Standing it up. There are 2 more construction steps to complete, but to do so, it's best to stand the Z-wall up. You will need a partner for this step. And you must know that this thing is heavy, so use the utmost caution here. Do not have anyone or anything within range of the wall faces. If they were to fall, they will cause serious injury. Don't be a jerk-off. Listen. Make sure you and your buddy stand to the outside corner edges and have at least one hand on the thing at all times until it is bolted together. Lay out wall 1 so it has the label BR facing up. Move wall 2 into position so it's face down on the BR side of wall 1. Go to the top of wall 1 and, with at least 2 people, grab the top edge and lift up. Move over to the uprights and hold. Attach the A-frame. Now this piece is not in a typical Z-wall, but it will help stabilize the obstacle and is a tremendous help during setup. Once it's attached, the people putting up wall 1 can let go and then go put up wall 2. For now, get a post level and make sure your upright and footer are at level right angles. Take your last remaining 2x4. Place one corner against the upright at an angle about halfway up so that it touches the upright and the footer. Tack it down temporarily with 2 screws, one on the upright and one on the footer. Take a drill with a 1/2 inch diameter boring bit and drill through both the 2x4 and the posts. Attach the A-frame support piece with 2 6-inch hex bolts, 4 washers, and 2 nuts. Go over to wall 2 and raise it up. Slide the 7-inch hex bolts through the upright and attach each with a washer and nut. Crossbeam. The last part of construction and the last part of standing up the wall is the placement of the crossbeam up top. This will stabilize the wall and ensure that it is rock solid. After the walls are standing, bolted together, and your A-frame piece is attached, take your post level and check your angles. When everything is straight and level, take your crossbeam and place it on top of your uprights on the top of the hangers. Make sure your building partner holds one end. Mark with a pencil or a scratch as to where the crossbeam comes in contact with the hangers. Take your drill and 1/2 inch boring bit and go through the 2x4 at that mark. Place the crossbeam on the upright with the hanger going through the hole and secure with a washer and nut. Go to the other side and repeat the process. Hydrate or celebrate as necessary. Now let's see the thing in action, fully assembled and painted.